Awesome. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Creative Collective. We are here with Boris Sanchez tonight. Guys, we have an amazing show. You guys are going to be blown away when you not only hear about Boris's story, but then moving forward into like what Boris is doing, how he's in multifamily, how he's going about getting some of these deals. I actually tried to get Boris on before, but it hit right as Boris was getting married and then on his honeymoon. So yeah, he was busy. We rescheduled, but yeah, I am super excited to have him here. And just to start, he's a huge race car enthusiast. I always see him with his cars on Instagram. Absolutely awesome cars. I love it. So hey, Boris, we appreciate having you on. Thank you. And how are you, man?
Good, thank you, and happy to be here. And thanks for the kind words. I appreciate it. I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. So, as we always kind of start, Boris, we just talk a little bit about your past, right? Like where you came from, how you grew up, mom, dad, all of that, and then kind of work our way forward from there. So, how did you grow up, Boris? Where did you come from?
So originally from Colombia, from Bogota, Colombia. I spent my childhood there. I guess it's a big part of my story because we actually got to see the Pablo Escobar terror regime
Mm.
for a large part of my childhood. We were affected, and we are here in the U.S. because of it. My mom was a very prominent attorney down there, and she was winning cases against the mafia and the cartel. And then one day, obviously those people don't play around. And then we were directly threatened. And then my mom just said, "All right, enough of this. It's time to go on to greener pastures." And so, yeah, I went through a really rough time there, getting here. My mom was a very determined woman, and she went through hell to get us here. Very grateful for that. And so, yeah, it's a large part of who I am, uh, and how it kind of built me from there.
Man, I love that story. My wife is I can relate. My wife is El Salvadorian and her parents migrated here from El Salvador during the Civil War, and they, much like you, own real estate. And I just think it's such an amazing story, like a triumphant story, because I think many people don't realize just how hard, going for most people in the US just get on a plane and fly somewhere, but
That's
trying
it.
to come from a place that is in turmoil like that to here is a very different story, man. That's unbelievable. So,
Thank you.
all right, so you grew up in Colombia during obviously a pretty troubled time in history, but let's talk about a little bit when you got here. So mom finally makes the migration from Colombia to here. Where did you grow up when you finally reached the U.S.?
Well, anybody that always dreams of going to the U.S. never really even says it like that. They always just say, "Hey, we're going to Miami." It's like the Miami is the U.S. Ask anybody that's actually spent their childhood in South America, and they're like, "Oh, we're not going to the U.S. We're going to Miami."
Right,
And so
right.
that's where we first landed. Yeah, spent 2 years there, then moved to
Amazing.
Houston. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm sure you know all about the Miami nightlife. You understand all about how awesome Miami is. I love it. I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu, man. I'm a black belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and I've spent a lot of time in Miami. A lot of the best players are out there, man. So yeah,
Nice.
pretty
Cool.
amazing. Yeah, yeah. All right,
Very
so
good.
you guys come here, you go to Miami. Did you spend most of your time here in the US in Miami or just a small amount of time there? Like how did you make the transition from there over to Texas?
Yeah, no, it was total. Matter of fact, when my mom never really told us we were moving. She would just said, "Hey, we're going on vacation," and then we just spent week after week after week. And as a kid, I was like, "Okay, when are we going back?" Then one time, like months later, my mom calls and it's like, "Hey, yeah, you guys are gonna get enrolled in school, so yeah, get comfortable." And it was funny because I never really got to say goodbye to anybody, and not that it really mattered. I mean, I was a kid. Who am I going to say goodbye to, right? But but yeah, we did spend 2 years in Miami. Like I said, really rough time when you translate, pesos into dollars. It's like, you realize how really poor you are,
Mhm.
especially living in Miami where the cost of living is really high, especially in the 90s. So my mom got a job with this great company in Houston called Enron. I don't know if you guys recall Enron.
I do know that. I do know that company.
Yeah, yeah. And so and then we moved here because of Enron. Of course, that company folded in like 2000. And
Mhm.
so the day that we were due to go back to Miami, she says, "You know what? We had already even packed. I mean, the U-Haul truck was outside and everything like that, and we were already ready to go back to Miami." And she said, "Like, you know what? No, I'm not giving up. I'm going to start a real estate company, and I'm going to do it the right way." And we didn't. I mean, she didn't really know much about the real estate market at that point, but she was very determined, and she made it work. And so that day was pretty decisive. We decided to stay in Houston and have her open a company.
Really cool, man. So, yeah, but what a massive change from going from being an attorney to coming to work for Enron. I'm sure that's its own. If your
Yeah.
mom was speaking, that's its own story. But then you guys
Yes.
come, yeah, from Miami to Houston, and then your mom decides to open up a real estate firm. So, was she opening up a brokerage, like a real estate agency? What was
She
her?
was, yeah, she was going to become a realtor, and then just that was her dream, is open up a company. Obviously, she couldn't do it right away because you need to get a broker's license and everything like that. So she started working as a realtor, and so she got a broker to actually sponsor her and have her start her own company. Yeah, so and you're real quick. Obviously, when you're in Colombia, you're a lawyer and everything like that. But when you move here, they don't really validate your career.
Hmm.
They don't really validate your college and anything like that. So you kind of have to start from scratch. That's the problem with a lot of immigrants nowadays.
Yeah, I agree, man. Yeah. Yeah, it's so funny, you know, especially with like my wife's parents and whatever, like people really minimalize like many of these people come from their country or engineers or attorneys like and then they come here and much like her mom she was cleaning houses and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So yeah, man, I'm always yeah, every time I hear their story, man, like riding the train here from El Salvador, I can't even believe it.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
okay, you come, your mom becomes a real estate agent, I guess then turns the agency into a brokerage. And so now did she heavily focus in the residential world or was she moving like I'm assuming that's where you kind of started learning about real estate, right?
No, that's funny. No, it's not. She started a residential, to start being a realtor. My extent in real estate extended to, or my experience extended to only putting her picket signs out there for her. That was it. I didn't. I was a kid, man. This was the year 2000, so I was maybe 16. I didn't really know much of anything. Matter of fact, I had the corporate mentality back then. I did own some businesses, and I guess to backtrack through about myself too. Um, I uh, I started my first business when I was 7 years old in my school in Colombia, and I've been kind of in the entrepreneur world in some kind of shape and form. Even through all the moving to different countries and stuff like that, I was always kind of trying to buy and sell and stuff like that. And so in when I was 16, I did own businesses, but I always thought, well, my real make or break it is going to be as a corporate man. I'm gonna work for Shell Oil Company, and I'm gonna work there. And by the time I'm 30 years old, I'm gonna own that company. You know what I mean? And so I had really a big corporate mentality. But although I embraced my entrepreneur mindset as well, I guess I always kind of just wanted my own thing, paid my own way through college and everything like that. So yeah, it completely changed my mentality. I didn't really get involved in real estate until 2010, after I came back from London, got my master's degree. And so, yeah, and she started in 2000. My brother kept it going for about 10 years. I wasn't really interested in real estate.
Mm,
But then I came back and I did see the opportunity then.
interesting. Yeah, that's really cool. So I guess your degree in business, like your bachelor's degree?
My bachelor's is in business. I started
Okay.
school in 2002. I graduated in 2009. Again, focused on other things and my business. I had a e-commerce business back then. I was an eBay power seller back when those things were cool. and Yeah, I was doing it all at the same time. I was going to work full time. I had my a store, and I was going to school and paying my own way. So, ended up being that I graduated in 2009. Then I decided, well, there's a recession. There's really not much of anything going on. I had a car dealership as well that I started at that point. I sold it, and then I said, I'm gonna go to school in London and check that out, see how that is.
Hmm. Yeah, so you've obviously got like an entrepreneurial spirit. Where do you think, like, where did that come from? Or is
It
it
came
just something?
really from my mom. My mom and my parents. They've been entrepreneurs, but also corporate people. I guess that's where I was kind of conflicted, is because they were both. They had their own companies, and they were also corporate people. They worked for others, um, and so I kind of embraced both sides. I didn't really fully embrace my entrepreneur side until around 2006, where my mom died. She passed, and I was like, you know what, screw it. I'm not gonna do this working for somebody else anymore.
Man, sorry to hear that. That's rough, man. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Um, yeah, so okay, so around 2000, I guess you said 2009 you graduate, right? That's when you graduated
Yeah,
college.
college. Yeah, yeah. I mean,
And
I'm
so
jumping around all
then
over the place. I'm sorry.
oh no, no, it's okay, man. Like that's kind of my job here, right? Is to like get like kind of put it all into order in context. So yeah, so 2009 you graduate. So then I'm assuming you go into the corporate world, right? Like is that you're saying that's where you kind of started out, but you're dually doing corporate and starting businesses, right?
Correct. I got my first corporate job in 2000, working for a Shell Oil company. I worked there for about 4 years, and then I worked for AIG for a couple more years. And so in 2006, when she died, I was just like, what is this for? Like, I
Hmm.
have the mindset to go in my own business, and I'm not. I saw quickly how the corporate world really just kind of swallows you up, and they don't really let you progress. They kind of, if you do a good job, you'll just do two people's jobs instead of just advancing you. And so
Hmm.
they really it's really difficult to move ahead. I think it's about who you know. You really have to have friends in high places there. And so I quickly saw that. I realized that, and then I was like, well, I mean, well, I might as well just go into business for myself, by myself. I started my car dealership in I think in the year 2006. Yeah, just around there. And in 2009, when everything went belly up, I sold it, and I gradually made my way to London.
Cool, man. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because, like, I do real estate. I'm an agent and of course investor, but I'm also a software engineer. And
There you
I
go.
I do that, man, mainly because not because necessarily I have to, but I'm a veteran and I'm a contract software engineer for the Department of Veterans Affairs. But what's
Nice.
funny about that is like my boss, I've been like getting to the point where I'm like, I got to get out of here. I can't do this anymore. It's driving me crazy. But
Sure.
hey, I'm completely remote. They pay me to kind of do minimally, but my boss came to me like not too long ago. It was like, "Hey, we're gonna give you a raise," and it was like
Oh.
literally a 2% raise based on my income. I was like, "Thanks for nothing, man. Like, you could have kept it, but hey, whatever."
Did you get a pizza party to go with that too?
No, no, like no congratulations, no nothing because it's all online, right? So
Oh
like,
yeah. Okay.
yeah, yeah, it was literally over a Teams meeting.
Oh
It's
wow. Okay. Got it.
super
Yeah.
super awkward, man. But anyway, yeah. Yeah, I'll be putting that to bed shortly and probably going back like straight entrepreneur from here on out. But anyway, man, that being
Sure.
said, so you transition out, you end up I guess, selling your company. And is that where you made your transition into real estate, or is that like, was there a slow transition from there?
Sure. So I sold my company. It was my car dealership. It was only for like 50 grand. It allowed me to go to London and get my degree. I was out there a year and a half. And yeah, honestly, the 50,000 doesn't really take you very far in London. If anything, that whole experience really taught me a lot about money management. I spent it in like 3 months. You know what I mean? Out there. And then
Yeah.
I had to be a bartender, and I had to go and wash dishes out there just to make ends meet. I never really got anything from my parents. I never really got anything from anybody, but I made it work, man. I lived by myself in a different country I've never been to before. That part really made me love myself, man. I was really confident after I got that done, because I was like, look, I may be broke after I graduated. I was super broke. I was literally the brokest student in my entire class. They were taking trips to Dubai. They were taking trips to Shanghai, to Poland to go ski, and I was just like, hey man, I gotta wash some more dishes because I gotta make ends meet. I gotta eat spaghetti so I can survive. And so yeah, it was funny how that happened. When I came back from London, my brother actually just kind of told me, hey man, now that you're back, we need some help, and uh come by and work for us. And so yeah, I started working for my brother's. Now it was the one that my mom started. It was just now my brother's company. Um and being a mortgage loan officer, right as obviously the recession was ending. And it was okay. I didn't really like that much. I was just like, oh man, I'll tolerate it, even though it's not really paying me much. It's working for somebody else, but in a different way. Um, and then I started investing. I started house flipping right there, because I really started getting to know the all the loan products that there were out there. I really liked the different types of programs that allow you to borrow and allow you to invest. I was really kind of nerding out over that. Um, and so I did a couple of home flips. I wasn't really convinced. I was like, nah, I don't really like how, I have to buy a property, and then I have to put all this money into it, and I just have to kind of sit it out in the market while I'm paying for this furniture, for the staging to be out there, kind of hoping and
Mm.
praying somebody will come and buy the house. It just wasn't for me. I was like, man, there's got to be something even better. I'm starting to like real estate. I like the finance side of it. So let me see what else I can do. And I bought my first multifamily property in 2013. I was probably one of the first in Houston to use hard money, or the hard money flip program that is now very popular for a commercial property. Back then, hard money was only kind of thought as a second chance financing, really not much for commercial. And so I just happened to come across two fourplexes that were side by side. I call it an eightplex, right? And then the lender was initially very apprehensive about it, because it was kind of sort of commercial. But man, I made it work. I bought it for $200,000. I spent $140,000 in the rehab. I'm sorry, I bought it for $60,000 back then. Yeah, it was exiting the recession. I bought it. Let me get my numbers right. I bought it for 140,000 and I spent 60 on it. That's what it was.
Okay.
And in all, my loan was around $200,000. I went to closing with $10,000. And I was able to refinance, cash out of it, and also sell it 12 months later. And that's when I had the big aha moment.
Mm. Okay, man. So that's a lot to unpack there, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, you go in. Okay, so you go into the mortgage, I guess, brokering. I'm assuming that's like normal mortgage brokering world in the residential section. So you're
Correct.
learning about, all of the loans. You probably got a good breadth of knowledge about like the loaning process there, but I'm assuming probably was mundane and like hard to get through. I watch mortgage brokers and normal real estate agents do it today, and I'm like, I don't know how you guys do this all, for like full time only. But then you decide that you're going to invest somewhere in that time frame, right? And so when you decide to invest, you end up finding this fourplex. Was that something that was like, did you have your eye on a certain kind of property, or like, did you know, hey, I'm going after multifamily. My first one's going to be a quadplex, but then you end up finding two quadplexes. Like, can you walk me through what your thought process was when you decided to make the leap into investing?
Sure, sure. I mean, I was home flipping first, and I did that for a couple of years. I just, it wasn't for me how, like it just went so, there was a lot of time, resources, and stress went to these flipping of properties, and then they would just sit there on the market until somebody bought them. That's really what initially made me jump into multifamily, was the fact that, hey man, I can, you're telling me that I can have an asset. I can do the same thing that I'm doing right now with the homes, but I can just fix it up, fill it up full of tenants, and then if I decide to put it on the market, it's going to pay me while it's sitting out there in the market. That's exactly what I need, and let's go for that. That's when I had the big aha moment, because again, like I said, I bought it for 140, spent 60,000 on it. Um, I got an appraisal for it, and it came back saying that the property was worth 472,000. And I was like, what? No, I mean, I know that I had filled it up full of tenants. It was nice, but it wasn't like a palace. It was something, that that had put some work into it. Um, I decided to test that theory to see if it really was worth 472, being that I was all in at 210,000. And so put it out in the market, and sure enough, a buyer came and bought it for 200 and I'm sorry, for $450,000. And I was able to make, a gross of around $250,000 profit. It was
Mm.
more money than I'd ever even seen in my entire life, man. And that's exactly when I said, okay, wow, there is something to this whole putting, filling the property up full of tenants. And there's something called a cap rate, and NOI, and return of income, that I want to make sure that to completely master, because I really want to know what I did right. So it's almost like I came about it on accident.
Mm. Man, that's well, that's really cool because first off, you're like, holy smokes, I this is more money than I've, ever seen in my life. And it's cool that you kind of, I guess what I call failed forward, right? Like you didn't even really know you were failing forward, but you like got this thing, I'm gonna make it work, and then there was probably like no other choice. But then when you did it, you're like, oh my goodness, like I didn't know how well I had done it, right? And
Exactly.
so then when you go, I guess, to sell this thing, you're learning about, I guess, like, okay, now when you sell multifamily, because I'm trying to wrap my head around like what your thought process was. So like now, hey, when you go to sell multifamily, I'm dealing with the NOI, I'm dealing with the cap rate. I've got tenants in here now. These investors are willing to pay a lot more money for these things than, let's say, your normal, residential house that you've got a renter in, which normally when you sell a residential house, most of the new landlords don't even want the tenant. They'd rather you just kick them out, right?
Very
Yeah.
much so. That you
Yeah.
stole the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly what I thought. Is like, man, I can't. When you're flipping a house, you only have really three ways to go. You can sell it, obviously without a tenant. You can lease it out, which means you would be limited if you try to sell it, or you can own or finance it. And so it's I really did not like being cornered. I wanted my options. And so with multifamily, actually, you can do all three. You can actually fill it up, and the more it's filled up, the more people are going to want it, right? Turnkey buyers. You can even own or finance it full of tenants. And so I said, you know what, this is a good asset. I think I'm gonna get further into this. And I stopped, flipping houses at that point.
Holy smokes, man. That's awesome, right? So let's talk a little more about that because now here you are, like let's fast forward because Boris is now, just so everybody knows, right? Boris is one of Houston's very popular up and comers, right? I see you all over the place now. And
Thank
then
you,
when you,
man.
well, I mean, when you hear your story about where you come from to where you are now, I think there's a lot of people that have this thought process like, they hear guys like Grant Cardone and all of these guys that are doing it, and it almost feels unattainable, right? But then you hear a guy like yourself and you're like, okay, this is attainable. I just have to learn how to do it, right?
Absolutely.
And like you said,
Mhm.
become the best at it. So let's talk about all the property that you own now, right? So
Okay.
we've done the very first property. How many properties does Boris own now? Let's just talk about maybe.
How many properties? I own 472 units now of multifamily, 252 of self-storage. I own land. I'm constantly buying and selling. So ever since that first one, I started just kind of experimenting with what I was doing. There was really no gurus teaching this back then. There was nobody saying forced appreciation. You kind of had to go look this up in Investopedia, and literally that's how I kind of self-taught myself about what I was seeing, this phenomenon that I was just like seeing about exponential growth of the asset if I were to just lease it out. And so yeah, started, obviously experimenting with refinances, hard money, the different lending products. I started getting more into that. When I bought my first 46 unit complex, I experimented with the agency loans, Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae. In that property, I had a huge $800,000 cash out. It's been really a fun ride, man. And the more I explore, the more I find out about myself, what kind of investor I am, what kind of future I want to have. It all comes down to the knowledge, and the experiences that you pick up along the way. That's why I'm such a big proponent of, when somebody asks me, hey, how can I get started? I say, hey man, I crashed a lot. I'm not here to say that it was been a smooth ride. No, it hasn't. It's been a very roller coaster type of experience. There was a lot of downs, because I kind of chose to get self-taught. I did have a lot of downs, but it has been ups too. And I'm fortunate to say that I'm a very good problem solver, and I think that actually helped a lot. Um, but yeah, I did not take the normal way of just kind of syndicating everything. A lot of people, they come into some money or they start flipping, and all of a sudden they're syndicating or crowdfunding multifamily. That's a huge step. I'm probably one of the few proponents of owning everything yourself. There's nothing wrong with owning a small to medium sized commercial building, a multifamily or something like that. I think that part of the market is largely ignored. Everybody just kind of wants to go for the 300, 400, 500 units full of partners and everything like that. It's a huge jump. And I kind of think that, you should kind of pace yourself and consider our other options.
Hmm. Yeah, so I'm right along with you in that mindset. I come from, again, I was in the military, but I was hurt in my last tour in Iraq, and I ended up a homeless veteran for 4.5 years in Houston. And I built what was a little handyman company out of the back end of an SUV, but I kind of am built on the back of a lot of hard work. And so I love that aspect about you, right? And I also love the fact, like, I like to own my own thing, right? And
Absolutely.
so let's talk a lot about that, right? Because now here we are kind of in the present, and I think that all of these new investors look to guys like you and they say, well, how do I become somebody like Boris, right? And I think this is where we always look to guys like you to say, if you could take what you know now and you could go back to a new investor and you could say, here's what I would take all of this breadth of knowledge that I have, and here's how I would apply it to get into multifamily. If you had to lay it out in like steps for a new investor to follow, how would you go about it, right? How would you tell
Yeah.
these new
Yeah.
guys to get
That's
started?
um that's a great question. I think it's a question that I get asked often is like, how do I follow in footsteps? First of all, it's a great compliment to myself. It's a great ego booster.
Hmm.
And I loved it. As a young entrepreneur and investor, I did not think that was ever actually going to happen, especially because I was kind of stubborn and doing it in my own way. But somebody, if somebody were to ask me that today, I would say kind of the same thing I always say is like, look, invest in the number one asset in the entire world, hands down, no matter what. One thing that can never take away from you, one thing, no matter how badly you mess it up, they can never ever take away from you. And that's up here.
Mm.
Okay. So your mind is the most incredible thing ever. It has the power to build incredible things, and people largely tend to underestimate that. If you kind of train your mind with education and information, I'm not talking about going to college. I'm not talking about that. Yes, I went to college. Yes, I have a master's degree, but believe me when I said the bulk of what I know, 98% of what I know, I learned by doing myself after my master's degree.
Mm.
And so I didn't really have any kind of special talents or skills that I learned. No, everything that I learned was out in the streets, doing stuff, working with my hands, working with contractors, builders, lenders, and everything like that. I wish somebody would have told me to slow down and pick up a book and learn more about what I was talking about before. Learn about how to value a commercial building versus a residential. What is the huge difference between the two? What's NOI? What's a cap rate? What's you know what I mean? What's the internal rate of revenue? All these things that really make a difference in your pocket. And what is a forced appreciation? A lot of those things I just kind of taught myself as I went along. But if I had armed myself with the knowledge that I have now, back in 2010 and 11 and 12, when I first started, I would have picked up property for dirt cheap, man. And I think you would have, I've gotten to a nice comfort level where I am now. But again, I think I would have done much better if I just wasn't starving. I just kind of learned everything myself. So there's lots of great people out there to learn from, and there's lots of free ways to do so. I'm not telling you should go and invest in $100,000 education from a guru. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying there's a lot of people out there who can teach you great things, or even sometimes videos online, and then or investors you can follow. I myself have a university that I hate to kind of plug in here, but I really do have it, and
And
I try to teach
don't
everything that I have learned.
Yeah, no, don't, no, not at all. Because normally I save a little time at the end, man, where we put all of that stuff out to folks. Absolutely plug that, because the people in this room want to know that. They want to know where to find you. So yeah,
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 yeah.
put it out there.
I'm just a proponent of, like, it's not really like a big thing just to come back to spend money. I mean, it's not. There are a lot of great investors out there you can learn from, people you can shadow and everything like that. Investopedia is an amazing resource that I don't really hear anybody ever mention. Um, I learned a lot from there too. And so, yeah, just by being creative is another thing that I would say. If you're starting out, make sure that you don't just learn one way to do things. There's not only syndication. There's not just, here's a building, let me get a bunch of partners in it. Nah, there are many more things to do. I would say creativeness in deal structuring. You really can test your knowledge of what you know. If you can structure a deal creatively, creativity in rehabbing, creativity in selling, creativity in a lot of different things. And so I just think that there's a lot of one-track mindedness out there and not
Mm.
enough creativity.
Yeah, I agree, man. I think being an entrepreneur, right? Especially now in the information age with ChatGPT and all of these things, right? It's about that. Like I always tell people, the information is there. It's just, can you go find the information and be creative with it, right? Like, but what I want to focus in on is, I'm a new investor and I want to buy my first multifamily, and you know and I've got maybe Boris next to me, man. I'm lucky enough to have like Boris in the driver's seat telling me what type of property should I look for? How, maybe how, let's say, how do I go? Where do I go? How do I go look for that property? Where would you find it? What type of property would you look for? Is there a price range? And then like maybe a baseline like a loan or a structure of a loan that you might go after so that somebody could make, let's say, 10, 15, 20 unit property their own, and do what you've talked about. Go in, put in that work, increase the value, and maybe turn around and sell it. I'd love to hear your perspective on it.
Sure. It just depends on your experience in the construction world, really. I always say that real estate has this kind of uglier cousin named construction, and that we all need to do. You know, I mean, we all need to go through it. We all need to learn about it. I did not know enough about construction when I started. I did not know what a sheet of sheetrock costs. Um, but all these things are necessary. So if you have no knowledge of or anything like that of doing houses, I say you don't have no experience in building or rehabbing a house, go out there and do one. I'm not saying that you're going to make a lot of money from it. You might not even make any money from rehabbing a house, but it is going to teach you a lot about project management, about costs, about construction, about what an hour or a day of labor costs. And so that's if you have absolutely just no knowledge. If you do have some knowledge, and you've done, some house flips in the past or whatever, I would say start out with your first fourplex. There's nothing wrong with fourplexes. I love fourplexes. It's a great gateway between the residential and the commercial world. I happened to start with 2 fourplexes, but they were very cheap, and I was at a great time, exiting the recession, kind of like in a similar time that we're going through now. There's a lot of great deals out there, and so you just got to start looking. But it's not a race. You don't have to go and buy a 20, a 40, or 50 unit tomorrow. That can be pretty daunting, and it's a different animal. And so what I always tell people, hey, look, it's not a race. You're not racing against Grant Cardone. You're not racing against me. You're not racing against anybody. You want to learn more about yourself. You want to learn more about project management, about multifamily. You're going to get taught in all of these things, so that when you get comfortable, you can kind of step up and say, okay, now I'm ready for my first 10, 20, 30, 40 unit complexes. You might not even like complexes. You might say, hey, look, I found a little storage facility that I want to manage. Perfect. I love storage, or shopping center, or anything like that. And so I'm just a fan of multifamily because I think it's easier to rent than any of the other asset classes. But you can still call it commercial, right? Still a commercial asset.
Mm. Yeah, interesting. So if you're, I guess, funny enough, I guess how I first heard about you was Josh Fard. I don't know if you're,
Oh
I don't know
yeah,
if you know Josh. Yeah, I know Josh. I actually met him through my broker, but yeah, me and Josh had talked about you a little bit. And then I actually had a potential buyer that was interested in one of your properties that was over in the Heights. And it's funny, right? Me having owned a construction company, like looking at something like this property looked like, I was like, okay, well, I could put the pieces together in my mind, and this is about what it would cost. And but man, when I brought that buyer, they thought that they were ready for multifamily, and then they saw that place and they were like, oh my goodness, it's too much. We don't know how to do the construction. It wasn't necessarily just, it wasn't necessarily purchasing the building. It was the construction that held them back. And I'm
right.
thinking to myself, this place is a great opportunity, and you're scared of the construction on it, right? Like, did you think that this place was going to be turnkey? Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
So I don't know. It's funny to me, man. I wonder sometimes if you think that like people kind of stand in their own way because they're just too scared to get out there and jump into the water and talk to the contractor and negotiate with the contractor, and or
Yeah,
the folks that go out and find the most expensive contractor to do all the work instead of finding the guys that'll do it at cheaper rates, right? Yeah.
exactly. I think mentality plays a huge, it plays a huge, I guess, factor in everything that we do, especially as an investor. I've always kind of said, hey, look, I am a big proponent of knowledge. Yes. Are you going to know it all? No. Are you going to know it all one day? No, you're not. And so it's about finding that balance between, hey, look, okay, you're going to want to learn stuff. Of course, you're going to want to learn the basics. And you're going to want to learn all these things that I talk about, but don't get analysis paralysis. I have a lot of clients who just don't, can't stop looking, and they've wasted maybe 10 years looking for that perfect deal. And meantime, I'm here wheeling and dealing, and I'm making good money, and my clients and my students are making good money, and I'm glad for them. So make sure that you have the perfect balance of learning and action. You have to take action at some point. If the deal looks like it's gonna pencil, let's go. If you're kind of scared, or not scared, but you're kind of nervous about the numbers, make sure somebody looks at it, or maybe even partner with somebody. I'm not saying you should 100% own everything, unless you're ready, but there is nothing wrong with a JV or partnering up with somebody who actually knows. I haven't really done many JVs myself. I tend to own everything, because I have my crew, because I have my management team, because I have my contractors, everything ready to go at any time. So I rarely ever kind of need somebody's expertise, unless I'm jumping to an asset class that I don't know, which kind of rarely happens. But I guess one thing that I can say about contracting, since you brought it up, I would say my biggest advice, if you're going to hire a contractor, is make sure that that contractor that you're hiring, make sure he works on site. That guy that you're hiring and paying has to work on site. That has, throughout the years, been the number one constant factor that I can say is pretty dependable. Whether, I'm not telling you to hire the cheapest guy, or I'm not telling you to hire the most expensive guy. I've hired both, and both of them suck, but the one person or the one contractor that I will hire is the guy that actually can tell you firsthand experience what's going on in your project. The guy is literally there. Maybe he's painting, maybe he's, maybe he's laying down bricks, maybe he's doing whatever, but he's there working. And I don't think enough people talk about that, but it is true in our, in our kind of circle of investors. That's one thing that's constant.
Yeah, I agree with that, man. And I noticed too, like with my contractors on site, like I've got one on now. We're turning a place into a co-living space, and
Nice.
the original negotiated price is changed, right? Because he had something that he wasn't comfortable doing, so I bring another guy. But this contractor is honest with me, right? Which I love. It's like it gets in, maybe the plumbing is a little harder than he thought. Well, now I got to get another guy, and so anyways, we're able to negotiate that price throughout the job. And because he's worked with us before, he's always giving us an honest price, right? It's I'm building a relationship with that guy, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I
I got
think
it.
that's important, man.
That's
Do you
good.
think that your fluency in Spanish helps you a lot on that side as well?
It used to at the beginning. I don't believe so anymore. I think my fluency in Spanish may have gotten me a few bucks off, but sometimes I don't even know, man. It may be. Sometimes it's about the availability of those people that I like.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when I start, hiring a contractor, he starts getting overextended because he's good, and it just kind of tends to test out their money management. Sometimes they get caught in a bind. Sometimes they're, paying or getting paid by Peter to pay Paul.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just kind of varies, man. I would say when you have somebody there working full day and paying full attention to your project, that's when it can go really nicely.
Yeah, I love that, man. Yeah. And it also helps, that you've been kind of in the trenches doing it. Like I tell people, it's really hard to beat some of my pricing sometimes because I was a commercial and government contractor. I mean, one of the last buildings I built, was a 128,000 square foot building downtown. And I've got guys that'll do, like sheetrock for $1.80 a square foot,
Nice.
all in tape floating off. But it's that I know that square footage price, which I'm sure you do too.
Yeah.
So you kind of like know where they need to lie, and if they're getting overextended, you're kind of ahead of them to some degree, right? Like Anyways, man, I could
Yeah,
go into the
you
all
know,
day
it's
about it.
all experience, and it took me years. I didn't start out by knowing this. Nobody starts out by knowing these things. It's experience, and you know, you try it enough times, and you'll get the hang of it.
Absolutely. Well, hey man, since we are short on time, I want to open it up for folks for questions. I don't want to take up all your time. I know I could probably do an hour and a half or 2 hour podcast with you talking about
Yeah.
multifamily. But guys, I'd love to open up the room for folks that have questions. Boris is more than an experienced operator, man. He's been around doing this for a while. So the only a dumb question is the one that you didn't ask. So yeah, guys, please feel free to raise your hand and ask any questions that you might have. And Justin's kind of our in this particular podcast. He's our multifamily. He's actually involved in a syndication, I believe, right, Justin?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I
I'm
know Justin's got questions.
I'm sort of in the process of switching over to owner operator model similar to yourself, Boris. So I appreciate you coming on. We got into how you got started and where you are now. Can you elaborate on how your business has changed over the years and what your focus is going to be moving forward? I know that you're big on owner finance, seller carries. I also know that you do some financing of properties as well. And so is that something that you plan on doing more of? And how has that all evolved over time?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that I've been kind of pondering about a lot lately. I've built myself a nice portfolio of properties and equity. I like to think that I kind of know what I'm doing. It's taught me a lot. Like I said, it's not easy sometimes dealing with these big properties. With the financing for them can get more than complicated the bigger they get. This market has actually also taught me a lot about equity and about forced appreciation, what I think things are worth versus how a market is going to treat them, the availability of buyers. And so I'm a very big proponent of forced appreciation, owning everything 100%. But like I said, I've built myself a very good nest of equity that I am now cashing out of, and so I have been selling a lot of property so I can buy it cash. I now that I have kind of built that equity, I want to liquidate that equity and turn it into cash properties, and so I'm going to be buying a lot of property cash. Which is something that you don't see a lot of people, a lot of investors talk about, is owning something cash. But I mean, maybe 20-30 million dollars that I have in equity, I want to liquidate that and start buying cash only property so they can cash flow and multiply and buy other properties. So I want to have over $200,000-300,000 of cash flow of paid off properties, enough to buy other properties cash and kind of multiply that. Because as I found, I could borrow all day long, and I have more than willing lenders to refinance me out of that and this. But there comes a point where you just kind of hit a stop sign and you say, well, my management has grown so big, and my properties have grown so big. But then, as I try to max out the I guess the threshold of the LTV, of the loan to value, I found myself, well, cash flow is getting more and more scarce, and I do kind of want to invest more in cash flow. And so I guess long story short, I've just gotten to the next level of things, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for this market. I'm grateful for the opportunities that it's actually bringing me. Haven't seen this kind of pricing since maybe 2017, 2016. And so I'm excited, man. I'm excited about this next phase. And I can't wait to continue liquidating and buy more cash.
Yeah. Are you planning on making a jump from, say C-class assets to B, A assets, less property, but, and maybe less units, but higher cash flow?
As I I already own a lot of Class B and Class A.
Okay.
Nice areas of Houston. But what I found is that, yes, there are better tenants, higher quality tenants, but they're different in their own regard. They're a little more pickier. They're way more pickier when it comes to maintenance. So to maintain these tenants there, it costs more. The rents in these kind of areas are not that great, especially as this market has proven. A lot of people are leaving central areas and going into other parts of the suburbs, and even sometimes Class C areas that have been renovated. In a lot of places, my Class C are outperforming my Class A's and Class B's.
Mm-hmm.
And so I COVID taught me that. COVID was the one that said, okay, maybe you should buy this kind of asset instead. I was like, all right, I'm going to go buy that type of asset. I bought it. And then I was like, well, okay, now this market really is teaching me it really doesn't matter. My management is good enough that I can handle both type of tenants. But one thing that it could be a danger is if my properties fall below a certain vacancy level.
Mm-hmm.
If they fall below like 60% occupancy, I'm going to have trouble in actually maintaining those notes, and that's a very good reality. Fortunately, I haven't even come close to that, but I see it, and it's something that I don't want to stress over, especially if I want to keep growing. I don't want to keep my mind of how my properties are performing, but rather I want to keep expanding, even in a contracting economy.
Gotcha. Nice. Can you give like a quick just synopsis of how you identify a good deal? I mean, I know, you can go really in depth with underwriting, and that, like you said, gets into the analysis paralysis of things. Some people use the 1% rule. Some people do just a quick underwriting. What's your process there?
Sure. I mean, as far as multifamily, the very first thing that you're going to look at is price per unit. I've learned the rental market well enough that I know that even in the worst of areas, I can rent for a certain type of rate, right, or per square foot. And so what I'm looking for is really cheap prices. I don't fall in the category of like buy expensive, like Grant Cardone used to say. Mm-hmm. I don't think you make money when you buy. I'm very much a student of that mentality. Is you make money when you buy. And so if you know your market well enough, then you can actually just go in and summarize your due diligence by buying right and being very conservative in your numbers. Mm-hmm. I try not to think positively when I'm rehabbing. I actually am very much of a pessimist when I am rehabbing, because I imagine, hey man, these walls, they look beautiful on the outside, but I know I've seen them on the inside and they're rotted and they have to be changed and everything like that. There's a cost to that. And so, yeah, I definitely try to be a pessimist.
Gotcha. Worst case scenario, always underwriting for the worst possible, huh?
Correct.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? Anybody want to raise their hand and come on here?
Well, I guess no questions because it was a ton of information, but I will say it was really a lot of good information. And I just want to ask one final question. So I found it interesting, Boris, that you were saying that the C's, to some extent, I guess on some of your properties are outperforming your B's and A's. So do you have any prime areas around here that you're looking for those C or D class properties? Let's try to get some secret information out of you.
I would say, listen, Houston has come a long way since, its olden days. I think we're leaving behind the D class. There's really no D class left in Houston, and that's good. Everything is kind of becoming rehabable. You see people renovating even in like Kashmere Gardens in Fifth Ward in the Southeast. The one place that all Houston kind of tends to forget about, that we have a huge northeast area that has a lot of land, a lot of property, and even renovations going on out there. So I would say you're going to play it safe anywhere in the east, southeast Houston. My properties in Pasadena and South Houston are outperforming my Montrose properties right now, and I have kind of similar rents going on for both. It's insane. I can rent out a 1 bedroom in Montrose for 1,300, and I can also rent it in Pasadena for that much.
Yeah, interesting. Well, Boris, man, I appreciate you so much for coming on and imparting a lot of knowledge in a short time frame. And I know tonight, guys, it was a little bit shorter. Sometimes we run hour and a half. But like I said, I know Boris is time constrained, but I do think that we had a massive amount of information on this one. So I just want to end by saying, Boris, can we put your socials in the chat? Like, how folks might get in touch with you, how they might get in touch with your university.
Please.
Justin, if it looks like he's on his phone,
Yeah.
maybe you could throw that into the chat
Sure.
for us if he gives it out.
Yep.
No problem. So it's simple. The university is CREU.online, commercial real estate university.online.
Okay.
And I can also be emailed at boris@sandmore.com.
Awesome, man. Hey, Boris, really, I appreciate you. And me and Justin have really been trying to get involved with one of your deals. I hope to do business with your company one of these days, man.
Thank you, man.
And I again, man, I always appreciate the time. I always say, man, when I was a homeless vet living on the streets, I was always so appreciative of those that were willing to pour into me when I knew nothing about real estate, man. You're one of those guys. So I really do appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right,
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me.
That's the end to another night on the Creative Collective. We appreciate you guys for coming. Please go visit Boris at his socials, get involved with his university. And as always, go out, like us on YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, Instagram. We have all the channels, and we appreciate you guys. Thanks so much. Talk to you next
Thanks,
year.
guys.
Next year.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care. Thank you.